It's an immense relief that the Australian government has been listening to our calls, has been listening to the Ukrainian government's calls specifically for decommissioned equipment. This is the largest donation of tanks that Ukraine will receive. Our community is absolutely thrilled with the news.
Is that from any country?
From any country. So we are absolutely thrilled and sincerely grateful that the Australian government has been listening and decided to take this step forward.
What kind of difference could these make?
Oh, an incredible difference. We've seen that Ukrainians are ready to fight. They're ready to defend. They just need the tools to get the job done. They're incredibly outgunned, outnumbered, and exhausted. So to see not only an entire fleet of tanks headed towards Ukraine, but to see that support from Australia that's on the other side of the world, it not only will boost their ability to fight back, but it'll be an incredible boost in morale, which they strongly need right now.
So this is good news for you, but what other military hardware do you have your eye on from Australia?
Well, as a community, we've been advocating that the Australian government considers any decommissioned Australian equipment. This is something that the Senate report that has been recently released from the Senate inquiry into aid for Ukraine has recommended that any decommissioned equipment from Australia be first considered for Ukraine. So there are things like Tiger helicopters that are currently coming up for review and decommissioning. There are also DJI drones that the Australian government has grounded that fleet. So we are hoping to get some answers from government to see if they could potentially consider sending those to Ukraine as well.
Now, in the last 24 hours, there's been reports that Russia has taken 2 more villages in Ukrainian territory. What's your understanding of what's happening on the front line?
Well, as we've raised this before here in this studio, the AFUO runs the Defend Ukraine Appeal, which is the largest non-lethal military aid fundraising campaign in Australia. We are in touch with over 50 different brigades across the entire front line providing non-lethal military aid. And we hear that feedback every day. We know that it's incredibly tough in Ukraine right now. We are going into autumn. There's rain. The weather's getting really cold, sometimes below 0 temperatures at night. So it's very tough physically. But we also know that Ukraine is outmanned. So considering the number of troops that Ukraine has versus Russia, it's remarkable how they're managing to hold the ground, but we also know that Ukraine doesn't have enough equipment, enough tools. So if they could get the tools to get the job done, that's the #1 priority right now for the troops on the front line.
And do you know people on the front line yourself, and how tough is it being a Ukrainian and knowing the hardships that they're undergoing right now?
It's incredibly difficult, Joe, because it's not only the people that are on the front line. They're obviously doing the most difficult work right now in the most difficult conditions. But we as Australia have the ability to assist that. We have the ability to bring victory closer. And seeing political will from the Albanese government, specifically from Richard Marles, from Pat Conroy, to see that they are taking that step forward and listening to those requests being made by the Ukrainian embassy here, that's very heartening. And we know that it's not only the front line that's currently experiencing these atrocities. Regular cities, civilian targets are being absolutely destroyed right now. There's no military targets that Russia is targeting. It's absolutely everything that's fair game for them right now. And so we know that not only are the soldiers suffering on the front line, civilians are suffering in terms of critical infrastructure being targeted and drone attacks every single night, missile attacks. There's a huge problem with mental health as well, having to deal with these sort of attacks on a daily basis. So it's very difficult.
And taking that into account, and these reports that even like North Korea is sending personnel to help the Russians now, what's the degree of optimism that you and Ukrainians have about the likelihood of a final Ukrainian victory?
We believe in Ukraine being able to defeat the Russian Federation. We believe that Ukraine is fighting on the right side of history. We believe that we have the whole civilized world with us. And seeing countries like North Korea about to have troops on the ground in Ukraine, and the types of countries that currently support Russians, whether it's the countries that provide Shahed drones, whether it's others that provide components and things that target civilians in Ukraine, we know that there's an axis of evil that the rest of the civilized world needs to stand up against. And we are very proud that Australia once used to be the largest non-NATO contributor of military aid to Ukraine. We hope that Australia will continue to be in that top position and will stand with Ukraine, because countries like North Korea being involved in Ukraine now doesn't bode well for our region either, and global security for that matter.